Hello, this is Tales of Dread. Tonight we'll tell you some stories about aliens. So have fun and remember to like, share and subscribe. I'm not sure if this is an alien or not, but I know I saw something about 5 years ago that I can't explain. I've been dying to tell the story ever since. About 5 years ago, I was on the way back from Warped Tour in Maryland with 2 of their friends. For those who don't know, Warped Tour is a kind of music festival. Warped Tour is a hardcore heavy metal concert tour. One of our friends' moms drove us because none of us were old enough to drive yet. It was almost night, but the sun was still out and it wasn't completely dark yet. We were driving on a 2-lane highway with trees on both sides and a median in the middle. Something ran out of the trees on the other side of the highway, jumped the median and ran towards the trees on our side. We were so close to hitting it that our friend's mom had to slam on the brakes while everyone in the car screamed like crazy. Not because it was a place to watch for deer, but because this was the scariest thing I'd ever seen. It was black, had long skinny legs and stringy black hair that stuck up in the air. This thing was moving so strangely. I can make it out. Even now, it galloped so awkwardly that it didn't run on all fours like a deer or something similar. When it jumped off the back 2 legs, landed on the back 2 legs, and jumped off again. When it came back down, it galloped across the road. Everyone in the car said the same thing, and they still say that thing. I'm sure it was either a demon, an alien, or a medical experiment that got away. It was big and scary, and the way it moved was different from anything I'd ever seen. I wish I knew more about this, but I can't remember anything else. Even years later, when I ask my friends and that friend's mum about it, it still gives everyone the chills. This is the strangest real-life UFO story, and my dad got it in Ethiopia in the 1960s. At the time, my dad was just a kid. He was 9 years old and playing with his best friend Gabriel. After school, they were playing in my dad's fenced-in backyard. When my dad turns around for a second to look at his friend, Gabriel is gone. It's important to know that my dad and Gabriel were in the top 1 of Ethiopia's ruling elite. The man who was in charge of the interior of Ethiopia was my dad's dad, and Gabriel's dad was a 4-star Ethiopian general. In the back, Gabriel went missing from a place with 10-foot brick walls and armed guards on the outside. Several hours go by. His parents, Mom and Dad and the guards are looking for my dad, but no Gabriel. 48 hours pass. Now, the kid of this important general is being looked for all over the country. This is in the news. Police are knocking on doors and telling people what he looked like and what he was wearing when he went missing. He was wearing his private school uniform, which was a white shirt and brown pants. Helicopters have also looked for him in the countryside. Nothing yet. After a month, 2, then 4, people stopped believing that he would ever be found. And think of the worst thing that could happen 6 months to the day he went missing. Gabriel shows up again in my dad's backyard. He was still wearing the same clean white shirt that was his private school uniform. He looked the same as he did before he went away. Here is where things start to get strange. After making sure he was okay, they asked him where he had been. He said that he went on a trip with 2 nice men. He was in a white room that was bright and full of children from all over the world. He said he was surprised that the nice men who looked like white guys could speak Ethiopian and that he could understand what the other children were saying, even though they were not Ethiopian. The white room that was glowing had no windows, and the doors went into the walls. There were buttons on the walls that, if a child pushed them, would make a bed come out of the wall. He said that he was then suddenly in a clean city where cars were flying all around him. He said there were people, but they looked weird, like us, but different. One nice man was still with him, and he took him to a tall building where he told him he had to stay for a while, and showed him he had to stay for a while and showed him a room he could use for fun. Gabriel said that he could push a button and the room would change to a beach or a field. Even the room itself flew. He said that after a few hours, he was brought back to Ethiopia and found himself in the backyard. He thought he was the only one who had been gone for 2 hours. Even though Ethiopia is a very religious country, no one believed him. Most of the adults around him thought the devil took over him. Gabriel was even forced to go to a priest to get rid of the evil spirits. My dad kept in touch with him until the end of their lives. Gabriel has a PhD in physics, and I think he works in Holland at the moment. At the time, mine most likely happened in 1995 or 1996, I used to be a pizza guy. I was out making a delivery, and when I was done, I was driving back to the store along the highway. Since it was evening and dark, I could see stars, but I saw 3 still lights almost in a row far above the horizon. At first, I thought they were from airport planes because they were much brighter than the stars. They only looked still because I was driving on the highway and my mind was playing tricks on me. As I drove down the highway for the next few minutes, I noticed that the center light started to move up. It kept going until it looked like a triangle. I kept trying to watch a triangle of lights in the distance as the whole thing moved toward the sky. I finally lost sight of this thing behind trees and whatever else and went back to work. I had no idea what was going on at all. I didn't say anything because I thought people would think I was crazy. I even thought that maybe I was making things up when I said things. I don't know why I remember this part. All of this happened about a week ago. I don't know when the Super Bowl was, but it might have been the Friday before. All I remember is that I was watching Sci-Fi Channel before the Super Bowl, and some show was about people who had seen UFOs or something. I've always had doubts. Then they did a segment on different places where triangle-shaped lights had been seen, and they started showing clips of the few that had been caught on video. I had seen the same thing. Since then, I never saw anything. I knew of no one else who saw or heard anything strange that weekend. Yes, I was a dumb kid when I was in my early 20s, so I didn't follow local news, but I'll never forget what happened that day. I saw a UFO up close, maybe 30 feet away at the most. I'm pretty sure it was made for the military, though. We were driving near a military base in Tucson, Arizona, with my younger brother. We were probably not even 2 miles from my house. It was around 10 at night, or so, and there was not a single car on the road. I turned left at a crossroads, and just as I finished my turn, I heard it coming up behind us. Was this sound the real sound that they play in movies and on hovercrafts? I thought I heard that. It was quiet at first, but the noise got louder as the craft got closer. Since it was going straight up, my brother leaned out the window and asked, "What is that?" I hit the brakes in response. I was shocked by what I saw, and I've been sure ever since. As I stopped, the craft flew over us, and I watched as the wings came off like a transformer robot and dropped about 10 feet from the craft. At this point, the wings were only held up by 2 rods that were connected to the craft. There were 2 huge thrusters on each wing, and there was an even bigger one at the bottom of the craft's main body. Because it changed into this mode, the shape of the movement suggested that it was in some kind of vital mode. It did a full 180 turn over a 2-story building just in front of us, and to our left. Its wings just missed the roof. Then it put the wings back together, making a triangle, and took off at an incredible speed back over our heads. As far as we could tell, the ship had 2 modes. One of them made the ship into a triangular shape and seemed to be made for quick horizontal travel, while the other mode let vital movements take place. It could change between modes in less than 5 seconds. In this mode, it almost looked like the body of a stealth bomber, but there were 2 sword-shaped things underneath it. Also, the thrusters were turned at about a 45-degree angle, but they looked like they could be changed. Everything was dark, and we wouldn't have seen it if we hadn't turned off the radio and heard it coming from behind. I'll be able to come back with when I was about 12, my family bought a fishing cabin by a small river about 70 miles from where we lived. When we stayed in this cabin for the first time, it was kind of like a work vacation. We did things like paint, fix things, and fish. Someone who lived nearby stopped by to say hello and introduce herself. During her visit, she told us not to be afraid of the purple glowing mist because we would soon see that it came from UFOs and wouldn't hurt us. All of us kids laughed and pushed each other over this. So my mum told us to leave and said she was sorry to the woman. She told us later that we were being rude. 2 nights after that, our dad took us fishing at night. Without the light pollution of the city, the stars looked amazing, and we all pointed out different constellations and tried to name them. My youngest brother pointed to a perfect circle of about 7 bright stars and asked, "What are those?" We all stopped and looked because, well, there isn't a constellation like that yet. Here, while we were looking at it, the stars went off in different quiet directions and disappeared over all of the nearby horizons. Looking back, we ran. It was dumb to run. I mean, the things were already gone, but we were scared, so we ran as fast as we could back to the cabin where my mother was sleeping. About halfway there, Dad passed us and ran ahead of us into the cabin, slamming the door behind him. He told us to be quiet and go to bed when we got back to the cabin. We did that because he sounded angry. The next morning at breakfast, when we tried to talk about it, my dad got angry and said he didn't remember any of it and to stop telling stories. My sister asked him why he ran, and he said he was tired and wanted to go to bed. Because he was tired, he ran. My dad can really screw up sometimes. We saw things in the sky other times while we were there, but this was the most interesting. We tried to take pictures a few times, but it was the early 1960s, and cameras, at least the cheap ones we had as kids, didn't work half the time. We were afraid to ask Dad to use his good camera for that. We had that cabin for only a few years before my dad sold it all of a sudden. We could never get him to talk about what had happened. Every time, he would say that it wasn't true. We did try. We looked for the purple glow mist, but we never found it. This happened on January 15, 2016, which was last week. I live in San Francisco's outer sunset around 7 p.m. I stuck my head out the window to see if it had started to rain. It wasn't. I heard a loud plane flying above that was much louder than the planes that usually fly in the area. When I looked to my left, I saw what looked like a commercial plane, but it was much bigger and its lights were very bright and made big cones of light in front of it. I remember thinking it looked pretty cool. Even though it was a cloudy night, I could see so much of the craft and how the area around it was lit up. When I tried to focus on its lights, they flickered and went out, and I lost it completely. Even though it was very loud, I could still hear it. After about 10 seconds, I see a light turn on about 2 blocks to my right. I see a lot of commercial planes in the sky, but this one was easily 6 times bigger than most of them. Even the lights were weird. I saw what looked like 4 white jet exhausts, and blue and red lights and lines slowly flashed all over the craft. It moved much more slowly than regular planes. I could see it for about 10 seconds as it moved north along the beach, and then it disappeared. I turned to see if anyone else had seen what happened. Low. And sure enough, someone riding a bike stopped at the corner of my street and looked up at the sky. The same place where the craft had been. I told them, "Hey, did you see that? What happened?" They turned and looked at me, then back up at the sky, and then back at me. Then they got on their bikes and rode away quickly without saying anything. I could still hear the craft, so I went outside and stood on my roof. About a half-minute later, I saw it come back from behind and slowly fly west over the ocean until it disappeared. I stayed on my roof and listened and looked for it, but I didn't hear or see it again. After about 20 minutes, normal planes started flying over, like they always do. My best guess is that it was some kind of, let me start by saying that almost every other time I've seen something, it was with at least one other person. The first 2 meetings took place on back-to-back days in 1997, and the rest took place over the course of 90 days a year and a half ago. I don't remember being taken away. I have filed reports with a mutual UFO network that is very bad at what it does. Back in 97, my friend and I had just finished making pizza at a place where we both worked. Around 11 o'clock, we were tired and ready to go get high. We had no alcohol at all. Anyway, we drove into a cornfield when it wasn't corn season, so it was full of rye. We were about a half mile from the road and it was pitch black. From where we were, I could see headlights for a good mile in any direction, but we were in the middle of nowhere, so we weren't worried. When my friend starts to break up the weed, I see what I think is a truck headlight shining straight from behind. Turn sharply left and go away. My friend didn't seem to notice, but I was getting very upset. I thought the police were there. My friend thinks I'm not there with him, so he keeps breaking up some awful brickweed. I remember looking up at the stars, and one of them stood out to me. I don't know why, but after 30 seconds, it looks like any other star. This star starts to move up and down, to the left and in circles. In a panic, I yelled, "What is that?" My friend just sighs and looks in the direction I'm pointing for 5 minutes. The UFO keeps moving in very smooth, impossible ways, and no one seems to notice. It does all of this without making a sound. This one object turns into 5 objects that look like stars. They stayed close to each other. Sometimes they moved in a line, and sometimes it looked like they moved on their own as quickly as they came. They merged back into one. We were in shock, but we didn't feel like we were in harm's way. We were talking about what we had seen, but there was still that one UFO. It wasn't going anywhere too fast. We thought it was almost over, but we were wrong. This time, the one thing became at least 7 things. I felt like they were being mean by how they moved and jerked around. My friend said he was getting nervous, so he must have felt the same way. I told him that we should go. I told him that I knew it was there for us, and I was afraid that if we left, it would follow us to the edge of town. This happened the night after he and I walked across my apartment complex to talk to a neighbour who was about to grill some burgers. On a hot summer afternoon, the sun was just starting to go down. When we knocked on the door, my neighbour let us in. His girlfriend, her sister, and some random guy I didn't know were also there. Ray and I hang out in the backyard and talk while he starts up his Kingsford grill. We're the only ones here, so I use the chance to tell him about the night before. The stars are just starting to come out, so I pointed out one in my story so Ray would understand what I meant. I'm still pretty high, so when I talk about everything, I'm pretty excited. I'm almost done with my story, and I saw Ray looking at the stars that are just starting to come out. I mean, this guy looks in every direction. It's like he went crazy right in the middle of my sentence. Ray points to the northeast and yells like that. Those shivers, he shouted for everyone inside to come out. They did this, and soon after, the same thing starts to happen as before. It lasted for a while. It went on for so long that everyone went inside except Ray and me. We had our hamburgers. As you watch this, a 300-yard long field was behind Ray's apartment. On the opposite side of the field, there is a line of trees and a creek. The other field is on the other side of that line of trees. As this thing slowly moves toward the tree line, I open the door and yell for everyone to come back out. We watched this huge ball of fire land on the other side of that tree line in complete silence. Right before we lost sight of the light, we could still see it through the trees. It got a lot brighter. We all kept asking each other if this was real, and this is the part where some of you may lose it, but after several minutes and at the end of all sunlight, nothing was happening. People were coming and going from the house. I remember talking to Ray's girlfriend in the kitchen while standing in front of the back door. Ray, my friend from the night before, and the girlfriend's sister were outside, my friend whispers as he runs by me. Right behind him is his sister. Ray opens the door for me and almost topples over on me. The girlfriend screams and slams and locks the door. After our "what the heck was that?" we all back away from the door. We thought it was something with 4 legs and brown fur that tried to attack us. It used to be a townhouse. We all went to the top floor to get a better look. It was hiding in the shadows and walking back and forth while keeping an eye out. This is when they came out of the darkness and were seen. They stood about 3 feet tall. The color of his skin was a mix of grey and white. These greys were short, and there were a lot of them. The animal thing starts to climb a utility pole at the same time. This isn't the usual kind of utility pole. It is shaped and kind of low, and it has 6 or 8 transformers on it. When the beast starts to climb, I can see that it changes a little bit. It chooses one of the crossbeams to sit on. It looked right at us, but it seemed to be paying attention to the ETS. For lack of a better word, it was like a guard dog. The greys had their eyes closed and something in their hands. The field seemed to keep them busy. They sometimes looked at us, but they were always doing something. What do you mean? I'm not sure. This went on for hours, and then we all ran back downstairs. Every now and then I'd go check to see if they were gone, and as soon as everyone was gone, I ran home. That was the last time I saw them for the next 4 years. I thought it was mostly a coincidence, but after I met my biological father for the first time, my ex-wife joked about my UFO stories while we were having dinner and wine. The crazy thing is that I don't believe in UFOs at all. Even though I've been through it, I still can't figure out what happened. I'm a pretty firm atheist, and I don't believe in things unless there's a good reason to. I don't even trust my own experiences, even if other people have confirmed them. But it was really hard to get rid of this one. One night, I was driving home to the country in Kansas with 3 other friends. We were all sober because I think that's important. We were about 20 miles from town in the middle of nowhere, on a country road. It was about 11:30 at night. late enough that there wasn't much traffic on the road, but not so late that it was the middle of the night or anything. I was sitting in the back passenger seat and looking out the window at a dark farmer's field with just a tree line next to the road. Behind that tree line next to the road, behind that tree line about 100 yards away, I saw something move. I look behind the trees and see blue lights flashing. I turn to my friend who is driving and tell him to slow down. We pull over to the side of the road and look out toward the tree line. At this point, the lights are straight across from where we are on the road. But at first, we were behind the trees, so I thought it was something like an electrical substation going off. But then the blue lights change and start flashing in all kinds of different colours, getting more and more bright and rhythmic, and shining God rays through the dust over the tops of the trees. At this point, I had gotten out of the car and was watching as the God rays started to come down toward eye level. Whatever was behind the tree line was rising up towards the tops of the trees. At that point, my friends started yelling at us to leave. We jumped back in the car and he flew down the road like a bat out of hell. The lights keep going up until they are level with the tops of the trees. Whatever was on the other side of me starts to chase the car, staying just out of sight behind the tree line on the other side of the road. My friend drove the car over 90. It was a slow family car, and the thing stayed right next to us almost the whole way back to town. Right before we got there, it went away. We talked about it for an hour at a gas station just outside of a town. Then, we decided to go back and try to find whatever we had seen, but this time we would take dirt roads that ran next to the country road. So we were on the other side of the line of trees. When we got back out there were fire trucks everywhere, driving slowly with their lights pointed at the field as if they were looking for something. They looked over a large area that was about 3 miles long. The next day, I called the fire department to ask about it. They told me that they had heard from many people in a wide area about lights or fires, but they still haven't been able to find anything. I don't know what we saw, and I'm not sure where I stand on the whole UFO debate, but I remember a childhood event that I've never forgotten and can't explain. I was maybe 10 or 11 years old, and I remember it clearly because it scared me more than anything else I had ever experienced. My parents live in the country, and my old bedroom is on the second floor, with 2 windows facing north and west. My bed was right next to the window on the west wall. That night, Henry, my dog, slept with me. I woke up to the sound of Henry barking, and the window above my bed was letting in a lot of light. I can still see Henry in the dark, barking her head off and staring into the light. I jumped up and looked out the window, but all I saw was light. The air was filled with a crackling, buzzing, and droning sound. I didn't know where I was and was scared for myself and my dog, but all I could do was pull my blankets over my head and curl up into a ball because I thought Henry was going to die. In my head, I remember being sad that I was too scared to help. I kept having the clear thought, I don't want to die, and I didn't realize at the time that it was the first time I'd ever really not wanted to die, like it was the first time I'd ever felt like I was going to die. There's nothing more to do. The next morning I woke up with Henry in my bed. I went to my parents' room and woke them up to ask if they had seen the light or heard Henry barking, but they hadn't. I wondered if I had dreamed it, but I've never had a dream so real. All of the fear I'd felt up to that point became less important. When I first heard about sleep paralysis, I was scared, and I mean really scared. I thought right away of that night. Some of the same things happen, like fear, vividness, and strange noises, but I wasn't paralyzed by it. I moved twice, once when I sat up and peered into the light, and again when I pulled my blankets over my head and shoulders.